Hey everybody, JP Guidry here with Guidry Golf and Sport. I'm part two today of my 5 pillars of golf performance training. I want to thank Mississippi Golfer Podcast again for having me on, letting me do this segment. And so let's get started. So yesterday, our last segment, we talked a little bit about building a solid strength base. Today we're going to talk about having proper mobility. Golf is a rotational sport. And so we need to be able to rotate through the proper areas, both for health, for our bodies, and creating efficient and creating efficient golf swing and having proper sequencing. So the main areas we want to be able to have good mobility through is the hip joint, so hip internal external rotation. We need to be able to get into our hips, sit into our hips, extend and flex into them. We need good mobility, rotational mobility through the thoracic spine and rib cage, as well as flexion and extension of the thoracic spine. We need good shoulder mobility, so we need shoulder elevation. We need shoulder internal and external rotation to be able to get the club in some of the proper positions that may be necessarily for a good golf swing. We need control of the pelvis, so rotation of the pelvis, anterior, posterior tilting of the pelvis. As well as ankle mobility, mostly ankle dorsiflexion to help us use the ground and proper footwork. We need good wrist and hand mobility, wrist flexion, wrist extension, forearm supination, pronation, so palm up, palm down to be able to have control of the club face, to be able to hit the shots we want to hit and be able to release the club. So when we talk about mobility, there's kind of a few aspects of mobility we talk about. So there's passive mobility, which is you're passively moving a joint. So that may be someone else moving it. You may be using a band or something else to kind of move the joint through the range of motion. There's active mobility, so that is you actively moving the joint through a range of motion with just the weight of the limb itself. And then there's loaded mobility or resisted mobility, so that you're taking a load, a weight, a band, and you're controlling that motion through the joint against that resistance. On top of that, we need to be able to add speed to that. And so that's kind of the natural progression of mobility. So if someone's severely limited, we'll generally start on the lower end of passive or very low level active movements just to get the joint moving. We'll progress to more intense active mobility. And progress that into some loaded or resisted mobility and have them make sure they have control of that range of motion. We'll usually progress from ground-based movements where we're kind of unweighted, unloaded, and we'll progress up into kneeling, half kneeling, and standing variations to where we've got our body weight through the joints and still having to create and control that mobility in all of those areas. And then again, lastly, we'll add some resistance to that, so to be able to strengthen and load those movements in that full range. So we need that full range of motion, but we also need strength and control through that full range of motion of all those joints. What this will give us is this will give us obviously the health of our joints, health of our body. It's good for that, to create the movements and get in the positions we need to or we're trying to get into for our golf swing with greater ease, and then to be able to quickly move in and out of those positions for a quick, a fast, and a powerful golf swing. So you can check out my YouTube page, Guidry Golf and Sport. There's plenty of examples of mobility exercises for all of those joints and for all those variations. We don't push into pain. If you get any sharp pains, pinching pains, make sure you seek out a professional before forcing that mobility. Some good tips of that. Make sure you breathe into the resistance. So I'll usually take my clients to the end of their range. I'll have them take some slow, deep breaths. And as they exhale, try to push that range a little more. A lot of times they can get a lot further than that first barrier. The reality is when we're improving range of motion, more times than not, we're not lengthening tissues, but we're decreasing tension. And that tension created from the muscles surrounding the joint and the tissues around the joint, we're allowing the body to let go of that tension. And so these are good things to work in, the beginning of your workout, warm up, pre-round warm-ups. I like to work them in, as part of the pre-workout warm-up, as well as in between heavy sets. of the strength exercises. So again, good mobility, especially through the hips, especially through the pelvis, especially through the thorax and the shoulders, but really having good mobility through all the joints of the body and having control of that mobility. So thanks again to Mississippi Golf for having me on. And this has been number 2 of my 5 pillars of golf performance training. Good mobility and having control of that mobility. Thank you.